The soil remembers I, the gentleman farmer. I keep two wardrobes. The suits hang in the townhouse closet in Richmond. Charcoal wool, Italian cotton, the armor of reasonable doubt. The Carhartt jackets and broken-in boots stay in the mudroom of the farmhouse, 43 miles west where the suburbs surrender to actual darkness. Most men my age are trying to simplify their lives. I spent my late 30s convinced I'd perfected the opposite. Criminal defense attorney 4 days a week, gentleman farmer the other three. A life of productive contradictions. The farm came to me the way land usually does, through death. My grandfather in March, my grandmother that October, as if she'd only stayed alive long enough to see the tobacco sold and the estate settled. 140 acres of Virginia clay and memory, including the original farmhouse where my mother was raised. The will specified that the land couldn't be sold for 10 years. My sister didn't contest it. She'd moved to Seattle and married a software engineer. She had no use for a tobacco allotment or a three-bedroom house that still had the original 1960s kitchen. I should have sold it anyway, legal restriction be damned. But I was 35, single, earning partner track money, and suffering from the particular delusion of successful men who think they can master anything with enough discipline. I hired three local men, Miller, his son Dwayne, and a quiet guy named Poole, to manage the actual farming. I kept the books, made the decisions, and convinced myself I was building something. The pivot to heritage crops was my idea. Tobacco money was dying, everyone knew it, but there was a market for heirloom tomatoes, weird squash varieties, artisanal dried beans, the kind of shit that urban restaurants put on menus to justify $30 entrees. I invested $40,000 in a farm-to-table place in Richmond called Heirloom. They put my farm's name on the menu. Whitfield Heritage Farm, Est, 1947. We served heritage Brandywine tomatoes that tasted like actual sunlight instead of the red delicious of the tomato world. For 4 years, it worked. I'd finish depositions at 5, change in the car, and reach the farm by 7. I'd walk the fields with Miller while the light died, discussing irrigation and crop rotation like I'd grown up doing it, instead of learning everything from YouTube and extension service pamphlets. On weekends, I'd drive quarter 26, 12:50 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline, Claude 128, the truck to Heirloom's back door myself, delivering wooden crates of produce that still had field dirt on them. The chef, Marcus, would inspect everything like he was grading diamonds. I was splitting my life in half and somehow thriving in both pieces. My closing arguments got sharper. My tomatoes won a blue ribbon at the county fair. I dated a paralegal named Sarah who thought the farm thing was incredibly sexy. Everything was under control. That's what I told myself anyway, right up until the summer people started leaving, the summer of departures. My nephew Leo came in June of that second year. 23, just fired from his third job, the kind of aimless that worries mothers and annoys uncles. My sister called it finding himself. I called it what it was, a smart kid who couldn't get traction. She asked if he could stay at the farm for the summer, maybe help out, get his hands dirty, learn the value of work, all the platitudes people use when they mean, please fix my son, I don't know how. I said yes because I had space and because I remembered being 23 and unmoored. I set him up in the back bedroom, the one that still had posters of NASCAR drivers my mother had hung in high school. I told him he could work with the crew if he wanted, no pressure. He did. He was good at it, actually. Strong back, didn't complain, showed up on time. But around August, something shifted. He started sleeping with all the lights on. I'd come home late from court and see his window blazing like an operating room. When I asked about the electric bill, he just shrugged. Sleep better that way. He stopped going near the East Barn entirely. That structure sat at the far edge of the property, a pre-war tobacco barn that had been empty for decades. My grandfather used to cure in there before he switched to bulk barns in the 70s. It was derelict. Roof partially collapsed, wasps' nests in the rafters, the kind of place you told kids not to play in. Miller stored some equipment in there, but that was it. One morning I found Leo staring at it from the house, coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. You okay? 126, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline, Claude 228. He blinked like I'd woken him up. Yeah, fine. Leo. It's nothing, just You ever feel like something's watching you? Like not a person, but he trailed off, looked embarrassed. Never mind. I'm being stupid. He left 2 weeks later, 8 weeks ahead of schedule, told my sister he'd found a job in Atlanta that couldn't wait. He texted me a thank you that was polite and distant. I called him once to ask what had really happened. He answered, but didn't say much. It's a nice place, Uncle Arthur. Really. I just, I don't think I'm a country person. Did something happen? A long pause. I could hear traffic in the background, proof he'd actually made it to Atlanta. You should probably get cameras out there for security. Security from what? I gotta go. Thanks again. He never visited again. Sarah lasted 3 weeks. We'd been dating for 4 months when I invited her out for a long weekend in October. The farm looked its best in fall. The fields stubbled with harvest remnants, the maples turning, the air crisp enough that you wanted to be outside. I was imagining us apple picking, making dinner together in the farmhouse kitchen, maybe talking about futures that included shared mortgages. She loved it at first. Took photos of everything for Instagram. Made me stop the truck so she could photograph a rotting wagon wheel like it was the Mona Lisa. We cooked, we drank wine on the porch, we had sex in a house where the nearest neighbor was a half-mile away. On Sunday night, she said, I could get used to this. On Tuesday morning, I was in Norfolk for a preliminary hearing. I called her during lunch recess and it went to voicemail. I figured she was sleeping in. She'd taken the week off work to stay at the farm while I commuted. When I got home at 9 p.m., her car was gone. 1 Forder 26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 328, all her things were gone. Suitcase, toiletries, the paperback she'd left on the nightstand. The only thing remaining was her engagement ring. We'd gotten engaged the month before, sitting on the kitchen counter next to a glass of water she'd forgotten to finish. I called her 17 times. She finally texted at midnight, I'm sorry. It's not right out there, Art. It's too crowded when we're alone. I read that message 40 times, trying to parse it. Too crowded when we're alone. I called her best friend, who said Sarah was processing and needed space. I drove to her apartment in Richmond, and she wouldn't answer the door. A week later, she sent the ring back via certified mail with a note that said, You didn't do anything wrong. Please don't contact me again. I didn't. I told myself it was her loss, that she'd freaked herself out with rural isolation anxiety, that I'd dodged a bullet. I threw myself into work and into the farm, proving I didn't need anyone. My mother visited that next summer, the way she did every July. She stayed 4 days before complaining about a humming sound that kept her awake. It's coming from underground, she insisted, like electrical wires or something. I heard nothing. I had the well pump checked, nothing wrong. She left early, claimed she'd sleep better in her own bed. Before she drove off, she stood in the driveway and looked back at the house with an expression I couldn't read. Your grandfather loved this place, she said, but he also kept a lot of secrets. You should go through his office more carefully. I did. It's just farm records and Arthur. She cut me off, something she rarely did. I mean carefully. Then she left, and I forgot about it because in the way of busy men who are barely keeping their lives together, I chose not to make time for cryptic maternal warnings I wish I had. 30. The East Barn, quarter 26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 428. By year 4, Heirloom had expanded to 3 locations. My farm was supplying all of them. Miller suggested we needed more help, maybe seasonal workers during harvest. The commute was killing the crew. Dwayne had just had a kid, and the 40-minute drive each way was eating his life. I had the idea while looking at the property survey. Convert the East Barn into bunkhouse-style housing. Nothing fancy, just insulated walls, electricity, some beds. We could house 4 workers during the growing season, save everyone the commute, increase efficiency. Miller didn't like it. That barn's been empty for a reason, Mr. Whitfield. It's been empty because nobody needed it. Now we do. Your grandfather never went in there. Last 10 years of his life, he wouldn't even look at it. My grandfather got old and superstitious. It's just a building. We started work in April. Miller, Dwayne, Poole, and 2-day laborers I'd hired from town. The plan was simple. Clear it out, assess the structure, bring in a contractor to do the actual renovation. First day was just hauling trash, old equipment, broken tools, about 6 generations of garbage. Miller called me at 2 in the afternoon. I was in the middle of a client meeting, a DUI case that should have been easy. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I excused myself. We need you out here. I'm in the city. Can it wait until... No. I'd never heard Miller sound like that. Flat. Final. I told my client I had a family emergency and drove 90 miles an hour back to the farm. 1:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 528. They were standing in a loose group about 30 feet from the barn like it was radiating heat. None of them were talking. Dwayne was smoking even though he'd quit 2 years ago. Poole was staring at his boots. The day laborers looked like they wanted permission to run. What happened? Miller gestured at the barn. You need to see it. See what? Just come on. We walked in together, just the two of us. The interior still smelled like old tobacco and rot. Afternoon light came through the gaps in the roof, full of dust. Miller pointed up to the loft. We cleared the equipment, started pulling out old straw and shit. Found that. I climbed the ladder. The nest was in the northwest corner, hidden behind a collapsed section of wall that had concealed it from casual view. It was about 6 feet in diameter, built into the corner like a massive bird's nest. Corn husks, dried, woven together. Animal bones, rabbit, possum, what might have been a small deer, and hair. Lots of hair. Human hair, long strands of it woven through the husks like thread. There was a smell. Not rot exactly, but something organic and wrong, like sweat that had fermented. Jesus Christ, I whispered. There's more. Miller's voice behind me. He didn't come up the ladder. There's a box, milk crate behind the nest. I found it. A plastic milk crate, the kind from the 80s, half buried in the husks. Inside, Polaroid photographs. About 50 of them. All of me. 1:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 628 me sleeping in my bed in the farmhouse, photographed through the window. Different angles, different nights. I could tell by what I was wearing, by the seasons visible through the window behind me. Some were from winter, some from summer. Me on the porch. Me walking to my truck. Me standing in the kitchen at night, visible through the window, drinking water in my boxers. The photos were old. The Polaroid stock had that yellowed quality. I flipped through them, my hands shaking, trying to date them. There was one of me sitting at the kitchen table that I could place exactly. November. 6 years ago, 2 weeks after my grandmother's funeral. I remembered that night because I'd gotten drunk alone and fallen asleep at the table. Someone had been watching me since the beginning. We're done, Miller said from the ground. I'm not coming back here. Miller, wait, no sir. I've got a family. Dwayne's got a baby. Whatever this is, whatever the hell has been living in there. He gestured vaguely at the barn. We're not going to be here when it comes back. We'll call the police. They can... And tell them what? That someone's been taking pictures? That there's a weird nest? He shook his head. They'll file a report and do nothing. You know that. You're a lawyer. He was right. I can't run this place without you. Then don't. Miller looked at me, and I saw something that shocked me. Pity. Sell it, Mr. Whitfield. Your grandfather should have burned this whole goddamn property to the ground. They left that afternoon. All of them. I tried to hire replacements, but word got around small counties are just small towns with more acreage. Nobody wanted to work Whitfield Farm. By June, the fields were going fallow. By August, I'd shut down the contract with Heirloom. I told myself I'd regroup, hire a management company, bring in workers from out of county who hadn't heard the gossip. But I didn't. I just let it go quiet. 1:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 728. And I never went back into the East Barn. I fry. 13 years of neglect. I'm 52 now. That's a fact I have to remind myself of some mornings, because the mirror always comes as a surprise. Somewhere in my 40s, I stopped looking like a younger version of myself and started looking like an older version of my father. The farm died slowly, the way things do when you're busy pretending everything's fine. The fields went to weeds. The equipment rusted. The fences sagged. I told people I was transitioning to remote work, which was partially true. The pandemic normalized Zoom depositions, and I discovered I was better at cross-examination through a screen. Less charm necessary, just precision and preparation. The truth was simpler. I couldn't leave, not because I loved the land or honored my grandparents' memory, because I was afraid of what would happen if the property sat empty. Because Sarah's last text echoed in my head, too crowded when we're alone. Because Leo had looked at the East Barn like it was watching him back. Because the nest had been built by something patient enough to photograph me for years. So I stayed. I worked from the farmhouse office, taking criminal cases that could be handled remotely. I drove into Richmond twice a month for court appearances. The rest of the time, I was here alone in a house that had been built for a family. I stopped hosting 4th of July parties, stopped inviting my mother, let friendships dissolve through neglect. I drank more bourbon than I should have, but less than I could have. I maintained that distinction carefully as if it proved something. The house developed the particular silence of buildings where no one speaks. I'd go days without using my voice. The land outside grew wild in that specific way that looks romantic in paintings, but is actually just entropy. Kudzu claimed the south fence line. The garden went to thistle and volunteer trees. The east barn slowly collapsed further, its roof sagging like a broken spine. I never went near it until the storm. 1:26. 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 828. It came through on a Tuesday night in October, one of those early season systems that's half hurricane, half winter. The power went out at 8 p.m. I sat in the dark, listening to wind tear at the house, drinking bourbon, thinking about nothing. In the morning, the damage was obvious. Shingles scattered across the yard like playing cards. A maple down across the driveway, and the east barn, what remained of its roof, had peeled back like a pulled-back lid, exposing the interior to the sky. I told myself I was checking it for safety reasons. Liability. If it collapsed entirely and hurt someone, I could be sued. This was lawyer logic, the kind of rationalization I'd built a career on. I took the shotgun anyway. For snakes, I said. It was October. There wouldn't be snakes. The walk across the overgrown fields took 20 minutes. The barn looked worse up close. The storm had ripped off not just the roof, but part of the east wall. The interior was exposed to morning light for probably the first time in decades. I smelled it before I saw anything else. Not rot. Something alive. Something inhabited. I chambered a shell, the sound absurdly loud in the morning quiet, and stepped through the collapsed wall. The loft was gone, collapsed into the main floor. The nest would have come down with it. But there was new habitation. Fresh. I could see where something had cleared a space in the debris, creating a small clearing near what had been the northwest corner. There were blankets, or rather, old tarps arranged like blankets, a camping stove, cans of food stacked neatly, and in the corner, curled under a section of blue tarp, something moved. I raised the shotgun. Come out, slowly. The shape shifted, unfolded, stood. It was a man, young, maybe mid-20s, thin but wiry, the build of someone who's strong from necessity rather than gym membership. He was wearing my clothes, or rather, old clothes that looked like mine, a flannel shirt I'd lost years ago, jeans that might have been the pair I'd thrown out because the knees blew. 1:26, 12:56 a.m., Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 9:28. He turned around. I nearly dropped the gun. It was my face. Not similar. Not close. Identical. The face I'd had at 22, the summer I'd spent here helping my grandfather when I should have been at beach parties with college friends. The face from my law school ID photo, before late nights and bourbon and the weight of defending the guilty had worn creases around my eyes. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then, slowly, he smiled. Behind him, a feral dog, something between a collie and a shepherd, sat perfectly still, making no sound. The dog should have been barking, should have been cowering or aggressive. Instead, it sat there, watching, absolutely calm. The young man raised his hands slowly, not in surrender but in greeting. His mouth worked for a moment, like he was remembering something difficult. "Hello, Arthur," he said. His voice was mine but wrong, like a recording played back at slightly the wrong speed. Each word came out separately, carefully placed. "I've been waiting for you to come." I kept the gun raised. My hands were shaking. "Who are you?" He tilted his head, the gesture eerily familiar. I'd seen it in videos of myself, depositions played back, a mannerism I hadn't realized I had. "I am." He paused, searching for the word. "Home." The dog stood and walked to him, pressed its body against his leg. He touched its head without looking at it. The dog made a sound, not quite a whine, not quite a purr, pleasure and submission mixed together. "What the fuck are you?" I managed. He looked at me with those eyes, my eyes, but clearer, the whites more white, the irises almost luminous in the morning light. "Better," he said simply. "I am the better one." 1:4:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 10:28. Then he moved. Not fast, not threatening. He simply took a step toward me and I stumbled backward, nearly falling over debris. My finger twitched on the trigger, but I didn't fire. Some instinct deeper than fear stopped me. He froze immediately, reading panic with perfect accuracy. He raised both hands, placating. "No," he said, each word still separate, still careful. "No harm. Not to you. Never to you. Stay there," I commanded, guns still raised. "Don't fucking move." He nodded. Sat down right where he was, cross-legged, hands visible. The dog sat beside him. Neither moved. I backed out of the barn, gun trained on him the entire time. When I reached the collapsed wall, I turned and ran, crashing through overgrown fields, my breath burning, my mind trying to catalog what I'd seen into something that made sense. I made it to the house, locked every door, and stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand. But I didn't call anyone, because whatever that thing was, it had my face, my voice, my mannerisms. And if I called the police, I'd have to explain how something impossible was sleeping in my barn, wearing my old clothes, speaking with my cadence. Instead, I went to my grandfather's office and started searching for the secrets my mother had warned me about 15 years too late. The reflection. The office was untouched since my grandmother's death. I'd gone through it once, cursorily, looking for estate documents and recent bills. I'd boxed up the important papers and left the rest, decades of farm records, receipts, extension service bulletins, the detritus of a working life. Now I went through it like I was preparing for trial. 1:4:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 11:28. There were ledgers going back to the 50s, crop rotations, equipment purchases, nothing unusual until I found a locked drawer in the filing cabinet. I broke it open with a screwdriver. Inside, 3 leather-bound notebooks. The leather was old, cracking at the edges. No dates on the spines. I opened the first one. My grandfather's handwriting, immediately recognizable, the careful script of someone who'd grown up when penmanship mattered. The first entry was dated April 1973. Met with Dr. Vickers today regarding the accelerated growth study. He's convinced the bacterial compound can be adapted for agricultural use. The key is the recursive DNA encoding. The bacteria essentially remember the genetic structure of whatever organic matter they're processing and can reconstruct it given enough time and biomass. In theory, this means soil that remembers optimal growing conditions and can replicate successful crops season after season. I told him I'd provide a test site. The East Barn field seems appropriate, far enough from the main crops to isolate results. I flipped faster, scanning entries. June 1973, first application of compound Vive mixed into irrigation water for the East Barn plot. Tobacco seedlings showing remarkable vigor. August 1973, yield up 40% compared to control plots. No negative effects observed. Vickers is talking about USDA approval, licensing, says we could revolutionize agriculture. September 1973, strange growth in the East Barn corner where we stored extra concentrate. Something that looks like a tumor or fungal mass, but when I sent a sample to Vickers, he said it's neither. He's excited. Says it shows the compound is actively assembling something. Then a gap. No entries for 2 months. The next one was dated December 1973, and the handwriting was shakier. 1:4:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 12:28. Had to kill it. God forgive me, I had to. It was growing into something with a face. Vickers said I was seeing things, that it was just random cellular growth, but I know what I saw. I burned it, burned the whole crop. Told Vickers the study was over, the compound was unstable. He threatened to sue. I paid him $50,000 to shut up and destroy all his records. The problem is the soil. It's still in there. I sealed the East Barn. I won't grow anything in that field again. Whatever that compound does, it's not just remembering plants. The next entries were sporadic, paranoid. March 1974, something is in the East Barn. I hear it at night, moving around. I'm afraid to look. July 1975, Margaret says I'm imagining things. Maybe I am, but I swear I saw movement in there, like something waiting. November 1980, it's been quiet for years. Maybe it's dead. Maybe it was never alive. Maybe I've been crazy all along. Then nothing until one final entry dated January 2008, a year before his death. Arthur came to visit today, brought his law school diploma to show me. So proud. He spent the afternoon walking the property, said it reminded him of being a kid here. He cut his hand on old fence wire by the east barn. I bandaged it for him. The blood soaked into the ground before I could stop it. God help me, I think I've started something I can't stop. That was the last entry. I sat there holding the notebook, my hands shaking. Blood, sweat, DNA soaking into soil that had been saturated with a compound designed to remember and reconstruct genetic information. For decades, I heard the sound of the back door opening. I had locked that door. I knew I had. But locks are mechanical things, and the thing from the barn had my hands, my fingers, my familiarity with the house. 1/4/26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 1328 Arthur. His voice from the kitchen, still careful, still searching for correct cadence. Are you in here? I grabbed the shotgun, moved to the office doorway. He was standing in the kitchen, perfectly still. The dog was beside him, silent. He'd changed clothes. Somehow he'd found more of my old things. A corduroy jacket I'd worn in my 20s, boots I'd thrown away years ago. Get out, I said. I need. He paused, considering the word. Talk. I need to talk with you. I said, get the fuck out of my house. He didn't move. Your house, he repeated, tasting the phrase, but also my house. We are the same. We're not the same. You're some kind of fucking clone or experiment or not clone. He shook his head. Better word. I am optimization. He smiled, pleased with himself for finding the right word. I am you, without the broken parts. What broken parts? Fear, hesitation, he touched his stomach, searching for a word, the twisting, the worry, the uncertainty. He looked at me with something that might have been pity. You carry so much weight. I don't. I am what you could have been. I noticed then that he was breathing differently than me. I was gasping. Adrenaline spiked. He breathed slowly, calmly, like a distance runner. His hands weren't shaking. His eyes weren't dilated with fear. He moved toward the office, and I backed up, gun raised. Don't. Your grandfather's journals, he said, bother, looking past me at the desk. Yes, I knew you would find them. I was. Another pause. Patient, waiting for you to understand. How long have you been here? 1/4/26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 1428. Growing, he considered. Long time, years. I was small, then bigger. Then, he gestured at himself. This complete. I watched you, learned from watching your movements, your voice, your face. He touched his own cheek. Learned to be Arthur. Why? The soil, he said simply. The soil needed a tenant, someone to continue. Your grandfather's blood, his sweat in the ground, but old, dying. Then you, young blood, strong genes, the soil, remembered, and built better. He took another step. I couldn't retreat further. I was backed against the desk. I don't want to replace you, he said softly, but I will, because I am what should have been, what the land needs. The dog made a low sound, not threatening, almost sad. You should, he searched for the words. Rest. You are tired. I can see it, feel it. You've been tired for years. Let me continue. No, Arthur. My name, I said. Don't fucking use my name. He stopped, studied me, his head tilted again, that gesture that was mine, but better, more fluid. What do you fear most? He asked. Not me. You fear being unnecessary, being the inferior version. You fear that I am right. He was right. I lowered the gun, not because I'd made a decision, but because my arms were exhausted. He noticed immediately. You should sleep, he said gently. I will. Stay. Keep watch. I'm good at watching. Then he turned and walked out the back door, the dog following. I heard him moving around outside, footsteps in the overgrown yard. I stood there for a long time, holding my grandfather's journal, understanding with perfect, terrible clarity 1/4/26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 1528, what was happening? The land had tried once with my grandfather. It had failed, grown something incomplete, something he could destroy. But it had been patient. It had waited for better source material. for me, for blood and sweat and skin cells to give it the template it needed. And it had built something perfect. Vis, Project Verdant. I didn't sleep. I sat in the office going through the rest of the journals while the thing that looked like me moved through my property. I could hear him sometimes fixing the fence by the garden, clearing debris from the driveway, working, improving. The second journal had more details. Dr. Vickers's compound, officially named verdant substrate in the documentation, was derived from extremophile bacteria found in volcanic hot springs. The bacteria had evolved to survive in environments where normal DNA would denature, and they developed a unique mechanism. They could encode genetic information from their environment and use it as a template for reconstructing damaged cellular material. Vickers had theorized that if you could control that process, you could create soil that literally remembered successful crops and could replicate them. Imagine soil that knew the exact genetic structure of the perfect tomato plant and could guide its growth season after season, improving each generation. The military had been interested too, apparently. The notes referenced meetings with Department of Defense contractors. They'd seen potential for rapid wound healing, organ regeneration, but the testing had shown problems. The compound couldn't distinguish between cellular repair and cellular replication. It didn't heal, it rebuilt. And it rebuilt based on whatever genetic material was most dominant in the immediate environment. The tobacco plants had worked because there was only tobacco DNA in the soil. But in the corner of the barn where my grandfather had spilled concentrated compound, where generations of farm work had left human sweat and blood, the soil had tried to grow something else. My grandfather had burned it before it finished. 1/4/26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story, prompt and outline, Claude 1628. But the compound was still there, still active, waiting. For 40 years, it had been in that soil, collecting cellular information, skin cells, hair, the sweat of manual labor. And then in 2008, my blood from a fence wire cut, fresh DNA from a young man in his prime. Enough information to start again, enough material to grow me, or rather to grow an optimized version of me, because that's what the compound did. It reconstructed based on ideal genetic expressions. No recessive genes for bad eyesight, no hereditary tendency toward high blood pressure, no predisposition to anxiety or depression, just the best possible version of the raw material. I found photos in the third journal, Polaroids from 1973, early tests, plants that grew too fast, their stems twisted and strange. And one photo that made me close the journal immediately, something fleshy and tumor-like with what might have been fingers. That's what my grandfather had burned. I opened the journal again, forced myself to look. Written beneath the photo in shaky handwriting, this is what happens when we play God with memory and flesh. But the compound hadn't stopped. It had just gotten better at building, more patient, waiting for the right template. I heard footsteps on the porch, not threatening, just present. A shadow passed the office window, him checking on me. I grabbed the shotgun again, moved to the window. He was standing in the yard, looking at the house with an expression I recognized. Assessment. Planning. The look I got before trial when I was calculating every variable, every contingency. He saw me in the window and waved, a friendly gesture, the wave of someone who belongs. The dog was lying at his feet, perfectly content. 1/4/26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 1728. I watched as he walked to the old garden plot, knelt down, pushed his hands into the soil. He stayed like that for a long moment, his palms flat against the earth, his head bowed. When he stood, I saw it. The soil clung to him differently. Not like dirt on skin, but like it was part of him, like it recognized him. He looked back at the house and our eyes met through the window. He touched his temple, a gesture I made when I was thinking, and smiled. I watched him for an hour as he moved through the property, fixing things I'd let fall apart. He moved the fallen maple off the driveway by himself, impossible strength in that young body. He repaired the garden fence with perfect precision. He checked the well pump, and I heard it start running smoother than it had in years. Every movement was purposeful, no wasted motion, no hesitation. He was me without the decay, me without the doubt, me perfected. By evening, I'd made my decision. This was insane, impossible, but it was happening, And if I couldn't stop it, and I was increasingly certain I couldn't, then I needed to contain it, to understand it, maybe to use it. Because here's what I was thinking in the cold lawyer part of my brain that had learned to find advantage in any situation. I had a clone, an optimized version of myself, young, strong, intelligent, and apparently capable of learning frighteningly fast. If I could control this, direct it, maybe I wasn't being replaced, upgraded. I opened the back door. He was sitting on the porch steps, the dog beside him. The sun was setting, painting everything orange. "We need to talk," I said. He stood immediately. "Yes." "Good." Inside. 1:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 1828. He followed me in, and I was struck by how much more gracefully he moved than I did. No joint pain, no slight limp from the knee surgery 5 years ago. Just fluid, perfect motion. I poured two bourbons, slid one across the kitchen table to him. He looked at it curiously, picked it up, sniffed it. Then he took a drink and smiled. "Good," he said. "Warm, burns, pleasant." "You've never had alcohol before?" "Watched you, many times, through." He gestured at the window. "But no, never drank. First time." He took another sip, considering. "Makes the head softer, fuzzier." "That's the point." We sat there in silence for a moment. It was surreal, sitting across from your own young face, drinking together like old friends. "What do you remember?" I asked. "Everything you remember, it's in the..." He touched his head. "Not brain, not memories like yours, but knowledge, your movements, your voice, the way you..." He tapped his fingers on the table, a nervous gesture I had when thinking. "All of it, in me." "But you're not me." "No," he agreed. "I am better. The soil, fixed the errors, made optimal." He looked at his hands, flexing them. No pain, no weakness. No, he searched for the word. No fear of obsolescence. "Is that what I'm afraid of?" "Yes, always. I can smell it. The cortisol in your sweat. You are always afraid of failing, of being insufficient. I am not." He wasn't being cruel. He was just stating facts, and everything he said was true. "What do you want?" I asked. "To be, to continue." He gestured around us. "This place, it made me. I am of it. Part of it. It needs tending. You have neglected. I will not." 1:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 1928. "So you want the farm. I want to be Arthur." He looked at me seriously. "The real Arthur, the one who should have been." "You can." He paused, considering. "Rest. You are tired. I can see it. Years of tired. Let me carry it." "And what happens to me?" He didn't answer immediately. Just looked at me with those clear eyes. "The soil," he said finally. "The soil always takes back what it gives. Everything returns eventually." He smiled softly. "You know this. Your grandfather returned. Your grandmother, all things, return." I felt cold despite the bourbon. "You want me dead?" "No." He shook his head firmly. "Not want. Not desire, but nature. You are the old version. I am the new. This is how things work. The land continues." He stood, moved to the sink, washed his bourbon glass with the careful attention of someone learning domestic tasks. When he turned back, his expression was almost sympathetic. "You are a good man, Arthur, good lawyer, good person, but tired, so tired." He came closer. "I will honor what you built. I will be you, better you, the one your clients deserve, the one this land deserves." He reached out, put his hand on my shoulder. His hand was warm, strong. There was no malice in the gesture, just certainty. "Sleep," he said softly. "Soon. It will be easier for both." Then he walked out, the dog following, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the terrible understanding that he was right about everything except one thing. I wasn't ready to return to the soil yet. Over the next 3 days, I watched him learn. He'd found my laptop. I'd left it in the living room, and he taught himself to type just by watching his own fingers. By the second day, he was reading my case files. By the third day, he was writing. I found notes he'd made, legal analysis that 1:26, 12:56 a.m., Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 2028 was better than mine. More concise, more precise. He watched cooking videos on YouTube and made dinner. Actually made dinner from scratch, better than I'd cooked in years. He fixed the water heater. He repaired the roof on the tool shed. He did in 3 days what I'd been putting off for 3 years. And he did it all while studying me, learning my mannerisms, my speech patterns. Each day his way of talking grew smoother, less halting. The pauses disappeared. The searching for words stopped. By the fourth day, He sounded exactly like me. I found him in my office, wearing one of my suits. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He was at my desk on a video call with one of my clients. I stood in the doorway, frozen, listening. Mr. Chen, I understand your concern about the plea agreement, he was saying. But given the strength of the prosecution's case, I believe this is the optimal outcome. We're looking at probation rather than incarceration, and your record can be expunged after completion. His voice was mine. His cadence was mine. The hand gestures, the way he leaned forward to emphasize a point, all mine. The client on the screen nodded, reassured. Thanks, Arthur. I trust your judgment. I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. We'll talk before the hearing next week. He ended the call and turned to me, smiling. I handled it. He was worried. I made him feel better, like you would. That's my client. Our client, he corrected gently. I am Arthur now. No, you're not. You're a fucking copy, a clone. You're not. I passed the bar exam, he interrupted. This morning, took the online practice test. Perfect score, 4 hours of study. I am more qualified than you. He stood, adjusting the tie. My tie. He'd even gotten the Windsor knot right. 1426, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 2128. You should rest, Arthur. He moved past me, patted my shoulder again. I have work. You built good practice. I will maintain, improve. I watched him walk out to my truck. When had he learned to drive? And head down the driveway toward town. He was going to court. He was going to appear as me. And nobody would know the difference, because he wasn't just wearing my face, he was becoming me, the better version. I went back to my grandfather's journals, searching for something I'd missed, some way to stop this, to undo it. There was nothing. My grandfather had tried to kill the first version, and it had taken burning everything. Even then, the compound had remained in the soil, patient, waiting. I couldn't burn the whole property, couldn't destroy my own life's work. But I also couldn't let this thing replace me. I spent that afternoon researching Dr. Vickers, found his obituary. He died in 1998, cancer. His research had been privately funded, never published. The compound had never been patented or registered. As far as the world was concerned, it had never existed, which meant there were no experts, no authorities, no one I could call. I was alone with a better version of myself that was learning, hour by hour, how to replace me completely. He came back at sunset. I was waiting with the shotgun. He saw it immediately, stopped in the doorway. The dog stayed outside, whining softly. Arthur, he said calmly, don't. Get out. This is unproductive. We can both. There's no we. There's me and there's you, and you don't belong here. 1:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 2228. He sighed. A perfect replication of my own sigh of frustration. I told Mr. Chen's story to the judge. She was sympathetic. Probation granted. No jail time. I saved his life. Your life's work continues through me. I don't care. You do. You care about legacy, about purpose. I am your legacy, your continuation. You're a fucking tumor that learned to walk. His expression shifted. Not anger, but disappointment. That's hurtful. And inaccurate. I am not tumor. I am evolution, Steph, the land's choice. Better tenant. The land doesn't get to choose. It already has. He moved slightly, just a shift of weight, and I realized with horror that he was calculating, measuring angles, distance, the length of time it would take to close the gap between us. He was going to rush me. Don't, I warned. I don't want to hurt you, Arthur, but I will continue, with you or without you. His eyes were cold now, certain. You taught me this. Closing arguments, sometimes you must be ruthless for the greater good. He moved. I fired. Send. The better tenant. The shotgun blast caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He crashed into the wall, leaving a spray of blood across the old floral wallpaper my grandmother had chosen in 1975. But he didn't go down. He looked at the wound. His shoulder was shredded, bone visible, with curious detachment. Then he looked at me. That hurts, he said, surprised. Pain. I didn't know. 1:26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 2328. Then the wound began to close, not healing, rebuilding. I watched as tissue knitted itself back together with visible speed, muscle reforming, skin pulling itself across the gap. In 30 seconds, the shoulder was whole again. Perfect. Not even a scar. Oh, he said softly. I didn't know I could do that. He touched the healed shoulder, testing it, smiled. Thank you for teaching me. Then he came at me. I fired again, but he was already moving, that perfect optimized body reading my intentions before I acted. The blast tore through the kitchen doorframe. He closed the distance in 3 strides, grabbed the shotgun, and ripped it from my hands with strength that didn't belong in a human body. He threw it aside and grabbed my throat. Not squeezing. Not yet. Just holding. His hand was warm, his grip gentle but absolute. I don't want to kill you, he said. You are me. Hurting you hurts me, but I will continue. I clawed at his hand. Useless. I might as well have been clawing at iron. The soil remembers everything, he continued, his voice calm. Every farmer, every life, it holds them, honors them. You will be remembered, part of the land, forever. Black spots appeared in my vision. My lungs burned. Go. Gently, he whispered. Please. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare into my own young face as it watched me die with something like sympathy. Then I stopped fighting, and something changed in his expression. The grip loosened slightly. 1/4 to 26, 12:06 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 2428. Good, he said. Yes, this is better. Acceptance. The black spots grew. My body felt distant, unimportant. I heard a sound, the dog whining outside, distressed. His grip loosened more. I will be good Arthur, better Arthur. Your clients, your legacy, safe with me. My vision was narrowing to a tunnel. At the end of it, his face, my face, watching with peaceful certainty. Sleep now, he said. And I did. I woke in darkness, underground, my mouth full of soil. No. That's what I thought would happen. That's what he promised. Return to the soil, become part of the land's memory. But what actually happened was this. I woke in my bed at 3 in the morning, gasping. My throat was bruised but intact. I was alive. I stumbled downstairs. The kitchen was clean. The blood was gone. The shotgun was on the table, unloaded. He was sitting at the kitchen table, the dog at his feet, reading one of my old case files by lamplight. He looked up when I entered. You lived, he said, and I couldn't tell if he was surprised or pleased. Interesting. You let me go? Yes. He closed the file. I was wrong. You are not ready. To return. Not yet. He stood, poured a glass of water, brought it to me. Drink. I took it, hand shaking, and drank. 4:26, 12:06 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 2528. I thought about it, he continued, while you slept, about purpose, about continuation. You built something, years of work, clients who need Arthur Whitfield, not just his face, his knowledge, his experience. He sat back down, gestured for me to join him. I did, too exhausted to do anything else. We can. He searched for the word, share the work. You handle complex cases, the ones needing experience. I handle the rest. We are partners, both Arthur, both necessary. That's not how this works. It's how it must work. I cannot be you. Not yet. I am incomplete. I know law, but not life. You have lived. I have only grown. He looked at me seriously. Teach me. Help me. Finish. Then. He gestured vaguely. Then we will see. It wasn't a compromise, it was a stay of execution. But I was alive, and in that moment, that was enough. Okay, I whispered. He smiled. Good. We start tomorrow, together. He stood, walked to the door, paused. Arthur, yeah? I am sorry for hurting, but not sorry for being. I have right to exist, you understand? I did. God help me, I did. That was 6 months ago. We share the work now. He takes the simple cases, DUIs, minor drug charges, straightforward negotiations. I handle the complex trials, the ones requiring nuance and jury reading that he hasn't mastered yet. He's learning fast. 1/4/26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline, Claude 2628. He goes to court as me. Clients think he's me. My colleagues comment on how much better I look, how much energy I have. Like you've taken 10 years off, they say. He has. He lives in the East Barn now. I rebuilt it for him, gave him the space he needed. He works the farm in his spare time. The fields are productive again. He's supplying 3 restaurants in Richmond with produce that wins awards. At night, I hear him out there walking the property, his hands in the soil, the land recognizing its own. I know what's coming. He's being patient, kind even, but I can feel it. In a year, maybe 2, he'll be ready. He'll have learned everything I know. He'll be not just my face, but my voice, my knowledge, my entire professional presence, perfected. And then I'll return to the soil. Not fighting, not anymore. because I've realized something in these 6 months of working alongside my own optimization. I'm tired. He was right about that. I've been tired for years, decades maybe. The weight of other people's problems, of maintaining the fiction that I'm in control, of being Arthur Whitfield, successful defense attorney. He carries it effortlessly. No bourbon necessary, no sleepless nights, no doubt. Sometimes I catch him watching me with something like concern, checking on the old version, making sure I'm comfortable while I wind down. Yesterday, he won a case I would have lost, a murder trial, high profile, the kind that makes careers. He was brilliant, better than I ever was. The jury loved him. The judge complimented his arguments. Nobody suspected. Tonight, he's out in the garden planting for spring. I can see him from my window, moving through the moonlight like he's part of it. The soil clings to him, loves him. He is what the land wanted, what it grew when given my blueprint and permission to improve. 1/4 26, 12:56 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 27/20/28. In a few months, I'll walk out there. I'll put my hands in the soil beside his, and I'll let the compound take me back, break me down, make me part of the memory. It won't hurt. He's promised me that, and I believe him because he's me, the better me, the one who will continue long after Arthur Whitfield the first has dissolved into rich Virginia clay and feeds the tomatoes that taste like sunlight. The soil always takes back what it gives, eventually. It just needed a better tenant. 1/4 26 a.m. Southern Gothic sci-fi story prompt and outline. Claude 28/28.